We continue now at the top of Daf Kuf Beizim and Beizim Mesechet Yevamos. This is Yevamos Daf 102b. The Gemara asks, "Umiika ki agavna." Is there really a situation like this? Would a person really wear one shoe on top of the other? And the Gemara says, yes, it could happen. The Chazyu Rabbanan Rav Yehuda, because the Rabbanan, they once saw Rav Yehuda, the Nafek Bechamsha Zuze Muki Lashuka, that he went out with 5 pairs of slippers to the marketplace. The Mesoras Hashas over here says Perish Zugos. When it says over here Zuzi, it means again pairs of slippers. So he had 5 different pairs of slippers, one on top of the other, that he wore out to the marketplace. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Yevama sheigdila beino achin. Let's say you have a Yevama who grows up among the brothers. So muteres linase le'echad min achin. She's allowed to marry. She can do yibum with one of the brothers. Ve'in choshen shema cholza sandal echad mehen. We're not afraid that maybe without realizing it, she once removed one of their shoes and therefore performed the chalitza, which would disqualify her to the brothers. And so the Gemara says, Taima delo chazinon. The only reason we allow this is because we didn't see that she actually removed the shoe. Hachazina, but if we saw her remove a shoe of one of her brother-in-laws, so chashinan, so then we would be afraid and we would say it's a problem for her to do yibam with the brothers. But the Gemara says v'atanya, but didn't we learn in a brisa? Bein sheniskavin hu v'lo niskavna he, whether he had intention for chalitza and she did not. Bein sheniskavna he v'lo niskavin hu, or whether she had intention and he did not. Chalitza so pasula, the chalitza is pasula. Ad sheiskavnu shneim kechad. You have to have that they both had intention for the chalitza. So who cares if we saw her take off one of the shoes without intention? It's not going to be a kosher chalitza. And so the Gemara says, no, hachi kamar. This is what we really meant to say. This is what Rav meant to say. Ava gav de chazinon. Even if we saw her, even though we saw her take off a shoe from one of the brother-in-laws, ein choshen. We are not concerned shemekivnu that maybe they had kavana. We don't have such a concern. We say that it's not a good chalitza. V'ika di'amri, there are those that say, they have another version, Taima delo chazinon. The only reason why we're not concerned is because we didn't actually see her remove a shoe. Ha-chazinon choshen, but if we saw her take off a shoe from one of her brother-in-laws, that actually would be a problem. It would disqualify her from the other brother-in-laws. But the Gemara says, the katana boy kavana, but didn't the Tana say that the kavana is required? So who cares if we saw her take off one of the shoes? But the Gemara says, no, hani mili lishtaruye lialma. When we say kavana is required, that's only for the chalitza to allow her to marry lashuk, to allow her to marry other people. But when it comes to disqualifying her to the brothers, even if it's done without kavana mifsala, that is going to create a disqualification to her brother-in-laws. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Sandal hatofer bepishtan. Let's say you have a sandal that is stitched with flax threads, meaning it's not with leather. Ein cholzen bo, that's not good for chalitza. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, Vanalech tachash. It talks about a shoe that is with the tachash, that's with the skin of the tachash animal, which is a kind of a hide, a kind of a leather. So the Gemara says, Ve'ema tachashin midi achrina lo. So if that's the case, I should say it has to be made of the hide, of the skin of a tachash and nothing else. And so the Gemara says, then the Gemara says, no, nal riba. It says many times in the Torah the word nal, and that's an inclusion. That means it can be any kind of leather, any kind of hide. Gemara says, nal riba afilu kol milinami, but if you're using the word nal as an inclusion, so then any kind of material, why does it even have to be leather? And so the Gemara says, no, imkain tachash mayahanile. If that was the case, what is the word tachash for? So tachash tells you it has to be leather. It can't be other kinds of material, but again, it can be from the hide of any animal. And the Gemara continues, boy minei Rebbe Elazar me Rav. Rebbe Elazar asked Rav the following question: who shall, or let's say the shoe itself is made out of leather, v'utrisiyosav, and then the areas where you're going to put in the laces, shel sar, that's made out of hair, it's made out of goat's hair. So mahu, what would be the halacha? Is that considered good for chalitza? Amarlei said to him, Milo karinan bevanalech tachash. Wouldn't we call that a shoe of tachash, meaning that would be called a leather shoe, and it would be good for chalitza? And the Gemara says, Yachi, if so, kulo shel sar nami. If it's all made out of hair, that also should be good, because anything that is tachash, or anything that is made out of hair, would also be referred to a shoe of tachash. And so the Gemara says, no, ahu karka mikri. If it was made entirely out of hair, it wouldn't be called a shoe, it would be called a slipper, and therefore that would not be good. So again, it has to be made, if just the trisiosov, if only that part is made out of sar, that's going to be okay, as long as the rest is made out of leather. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rav Kahana l'Shmuel. Rav Kahana says to Shmuel, Mimai dahai v'cholza nalo me'al raglo mishlafu. How do we know that when it says that v'cholza nalo, that it means she's removing the shoe from his foot? because there's a pasuk that says that you remove the stones, talking about saras. Let's say the stones of the house have saras, you have to remove them. So how do you know that's what it means? We have other examples where the term chalitza is used in the Torah, and it doesn't mean to remove. Ve'ema zeruzehu, for example, maybe it means to say to strengthen. D'chsiv, like the pasuk says, Hecholtzu mayitzchem anoshim latzav. It means take strong men. You're going to take them to war. So there we see another use of the word chalitza, and maybe that's what it means over here. She has to strengthen the shoe upon his foot. And so the Gemara says, no, hasam nami, there also, by the case of the war, shalufei mi beisel likrava. What it means is remove them from the house and take them out to war. And the Gemara says, vaksib, but isn't there another pasuk? It says, yechaletz ani bi'anyo. It says that you strengthen the poor person with his afflictions. So again, it seems to be strengthening. And the Gemara says, no, that's not the interpretation. Bischar anyo. What it means is, as a reward for his afflictions, yechaltzu midina shel gehenim, he's removed from the judgment of Gehenim. Again, it has a connotation of removal. And the Gemara continues along the same lines. But what about the pasuk which says, Chona malach Hashem saviv lireyav, there's an angel around those who fear him, vayechaltzeim, and again, it seems to be he strengthens them. And so the Gemara says, no, it means to say, bischar yireyav, for the reward of fearing him, yechaltzeim midina shel Gehenim, they are removed from the judgment of Gehenim. Again, it has the same connotation of removal. And the Gemara continues, but what about the following pasuk which says, so again it talks about strengthening of the bones. V'yomer Rebbe Elazar, and Rebbe Elazar says, this is the greatest. This pasuk represents the greatest of the blessings. V'yomer Rav, and Rav says, Zeruze Garmi, that it means to say the strengthening of the bones. And the Gemara says, yes, you are correct. Sometimes it does mean strengthening. It means this way and it can mean that way. Sometimes it can mean removal. Sometimes it can mean strengthening. But over here, in our case, where it talks about me'al raglo, removing the shoe from his foot, if you think that it means to strengthen, it should have said biraglo, not me'al raglo. The fact that it says me'al raglo from his foot, that implies that she's removing it from his foot. But the Gemara continues, but 1 second, if it would have said biraglo, havamina biraglo, and I would think on his foot, yes, beshuko lo, but on his calf, no. In other words, I would have thought that it comes to exclude an amputee. So kasav rachmana me'al raglo. So maybe that's why the pasuk says me'al raglo. Da'afilo b'shuko means to say you can even strengthen it around his calf, meaning even if his foot is amputated, that would still be good, but then it could still mean to strengthen. And so the Gemara says, no, imkain, if that were the case, lichtov rachmana b'me'al raglo. If it meant to strengthen it on the upper part of his foot, it could have said b'me'al raglo. You strengthen it on the upper part above his foot, and that would have told us his calf as well. My me'al raglo, what does it mean from on his foot? Shma mina mishlafu. You see that it really means to remove it from his foot. And the Gemara continues, Amar le'ahu mino l'Rebbe Gamliel. There was a certain heretic who said to Rebbe Gamliel, Amo dechalatz le'mari mineh. You're a nation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has removed himself from the nation. Because the pasuk itself says, B'tzonom uvavkarim yelchu levakish as Hashem. They're going to go seek Hashem. V'lo yimtzo cholatz mehem. It says cholatz mehem. And the heretic understood that it means that Hashem removed himself from the nation of Klal Yisrael. So Amar le, so he said back to him, Shota, you're an imbecile. Miksiv cholatz lohem. It doesn't say cholatz lohem. If it would have said cholatz lohem, meaning Hashem did the chalitza to them, it would mean that Hashem removed himself from Klal Yisrael. But cholatz mehem ksiv, it says the cholatz mehem. Cholatz mehem means to say that they're the ones that did the chalitza, meaning to say that Klal Yisrael is the one that abandoned HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'ilu Yevama, and according to the way that you're reading it, if a Yevama, techoltzu la'achin, let's say the brothers came along and they removed her shoe, because according to your reading, you'd have to read it in that direction. Midi mashasha isbei, does that have any substance to it? Of course not. So therefore you see that when it talks about doing the chalitza, just like over there it's talking about the fact that she removes the shoe from her brother-in-law, so too over here it's talking about the fact that Klal Yisrael abandoned HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And as Rashi over here explains, Hu kibel chalitza mehem, the way to understand the pasuk is that he receives the chalitza from them, meaning again, they remove themselves, they abandon HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'ilu Yevama, whereas by Yevama, the cholzi mina achin shayavam kibel heimena. If you would do it backwards, where the brothers accept the shoe from her, in other words, they remove the shoe from her, midi mashasha isbe, would that have any substance to it? So obviously not. So again, it means to say that she is the one that's being mekabel from them, just like over over here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is being makabel the chalitza from us in the sense that the pasuk means we are abandoning HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "Ban pilya chalitza psula v'chulu." It said if you use a cloth shoe, that's not good for chalitza. And the Gemara says, "Lemeimra dan pilya lav minolhu." Does that mean to say that on pilya, when it comes to a cloth shoe, that's not considered a shoe? Utzanan nami, we have a Mishnah that supports this as well. This is a Mishnah in Shkolim. It says, "Ein hatorim nichnas lo bepargud chafus v'lo ba'an pilya." It says the person who's taking the Shkolim, he cannot enter. Pargud chafus refers to a kind of garment that has like a cuff, an area where you might hide some money, and on pilya refers to this kind of cloth shoe again. Vein sarach lomar b'minol v'sandal, and certainly you can't enter with a minol and sandal. Lefi she'ein nichnasim b'minol v'sandal azara, because in general you're not allowed to enter with a minol and sandal into the azara. In other words, the point over here is this Mishnah is not considering on pilya to be the same thing as minol and sandal. On pilya is prohibited because we're afraid that the person might end up hiding or be suspected of hiding some money inside the anpilya. But minol and sandal, those are considered real shoes. Those you're never allowed to enter into the azara with. So again, you see that anpilya is not considered the same status as a regular shoe as a minol and a sandal. But the Gemara asks for a minol, but we have the following contradiction. Echad minol v'sandal v'anpilya lo yitayil ben. It says on Yom Kippur when it comes to minol, sandal, and anpilya, you're not allowed to take a walk with them. Lo mi bayis lebayis v'lo mi mita lemita. Not from one house to another house, not from one bed to another bed. And the point over here is it seems that anpilya is considered to be a regular shoe. And so the Gemara says, Amar Abaya says, the isbeik sisiu mishum tanug. If it has padding and it's pleasurable, so then it's going to be a problem on Yom Kippur. It really is not considered to be a regular shoe, but if it gives a person pleasure, that's going to be a problem again on Yom Kippur. And so the Gemara says, Amar le Rava, so Rava says to Abaya, Misham Tanag below minol b'yom HaKippurim mi'asiri. If something is pleasurable but it's not considered a shoe on Yom Kippur, that's going to be usur. V'Rabba bar Rav Huna karich sudra kariv v'nafik. But Rabba bar Rav Huna, he would take like a scarf and he would tie it on his leg and he would go out. In other words, he would keep his feet comfortable, but as long as it's not a shoe, that would be considered okay. So Elo my Rava, so the Gemara says, rather Rava says, Lokash, it's not difficult. Kan ban pilya shal or kan ban pilya shal beged. It depends what kind of anpilya. You can have an anpilya that's made out of leather, and you can have an anpilya that's made out of cloth. If it's made out of leather, then it's going to be considered a shoe. If it's made out of cloth, it's not going to be considered a shoe. And the Gemara says, Hachinam mistaber, this makes sense, this answer. Because if you didn't say this, Kasha Yom HaKippurim, Yom HaKippurim, you'd actually have a contradiction within Yom Kippur itself. Tanya, because there's another brisa that says, Lo yetayil adam b'kor dekisin b'soch beiso, a person is not allowed to stroll around. These are a kind of slipper. Rashi over here says, b'kor dekisin min olayim dakim, it's like thin shoes. Shenoel and tachas min alayim avim. They would actually wear them underneath some stronger shoes, lohagin min amayim, to protect from the water. So again, on Yom Kippur, you're not allowed to use these kind of slippers. Aval metayilhu, again besoch beiso, you can't use these kinds in his house. Aval metayilhu ba'anpilin besoch beiso, but he is allowed to take the anpilin. He is allowed to walk around with anpilin inside his house, and that's a contradiction. We just said before on Yom Kippur that anpilya is going to be forbidden, and here we say that anpilya is going to be okay on Yom Kippur. Elalav shma mina kan ba'anpilya shalor, kan ba'anpilya shal begad. Obviously, what do we see from here? In one case, we're talking about leather. In the other case, we're talking about cloth. Leather would be a problem. Cloth would be okay. Shma mina, you see from this that indeed this is the distinction that we do make. And the Gemara continues, Tanya kivase de Rava, we have a brisa that supports this answer of Rava making a distinction between anpilya shal or and anpilya shal beged. The brisa says, Cholza b'minol hanifram, let's say she does the chalitza with a shoe and the shoe is separated by the seams, shechofa es rov haregel, but it covers most of the foot, or besandal hanifchas, or also again you have a sandal that's open, shemekabel es rov haregel, but it's able to cover up, to receive, so to speak, most of the foot. Besandal shal sham, or let's say it's a sandal of sham. Sham is talking about it's made out of cork. V'shel siv, or let's say it's the fibers of branches. Or bekav hakiteya, let's say it's kav hakiteya, that's like the prosthetic that an amputee wears. Or b'mok, let's say it's made out of mok, and mok refers to a felt shoe. B'smichas haraglayim, or let's say he's going out. B'smichas haraglayim, Rashi over here says, B'smichas haraglayim, misha mahalech b'yodav, a person he's really walking with his hands. V'gores raglav, and he drags his feet. Osalahem smicha shalet. So what he does is, he puts like a kind of support for himself made out of wood, o shalor, made out of leather, umachnis lasocho, and then he puts his feet inside of that. And the brisa continues, Banpilya shalor, let's say again, she does the chalitza with anpilya, with these shoes that are made out of leather, these anpilya made out of leather. And let's say somebody does chalitza from an adult, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph.